All right. So now that's all being recorded.
It's so much better. I can read everything.
Wonderful. Well, I guess this will be like a beginner to Unreal Audio stuff if this becomes a thing.
Yeah.
I don't have any set schedule, so just whatever you want to know, and I'll cover it.
Okay, cool. Well, let's check out an audio source. Is it the same thing
Audio source.
in Unity as in...
Yep. So there's a couple of different ways to do audio sources. The most basic way is literally to grab a bit of audio that you have. Here's fucking like a car engine. You can just drag that directly into the scene,
Oh, cool.
and that will create an audio source immediately there.
Mm-hmm.
That you can already set that to be like looping or doing whatever you want to do. It's got spatialization and attenuation settings there, so you can go and adjust those as you like. The benefits of doing it this way is it's quick and easy.
Yeah.
Especially if you're doing like 2D sounds, like if you're wanting something not spatialized, like a bit of music, dragging it in there is good. The bad side is like it's just kind of in your scene, especially if it's not spatialized. Because it's not attached to anything, it can be harder to interact with from like code and other things, right? So if you're wanting to change it, Unreal like auto saves every once in a while. I think it's like once every 12 seconds or something.
12 seconds. Oh, wow.
You can adjust it, but yeah. And it'll only do it if you've actually changed something. So because I dragged in a song, it's like, all right, let's make sure that that's saved.
Yeah.
So you can do that. So another...
Yeah, like take
me
through all of those bits in the audio source, all of
Okay.
those different components.
Okay, right. Well, before that, what I'll do is... Say you've dragged in a bit of audio, right? So I was doing some stuff with birds last night, and I dragged in these clips of sparrows down here.
Then loop.
Once you've dragged in there, Unreal used to be more specific about what files it wanted. It's not anymore.
Cool.
So you can just kind of put in whatever you like. You'll have these settings in your audio file yourself. It's good to change and adjust these settings as needed, and you will need to do that for each audio file you put in. But you can batch them and edit them all at once if you've got lots of them that are all going to be the same.
That's great. Oh, okay, so it's got like streaming. It's got
yeah.
loop.
So.
What's group?
Yes. I'll go slowly through all of these. Ambisonic stuff I've never actually wandered around with. I'm sure you're more familiar with ambisonic audio formats. I've never done anything with them before, so that. Compression quality. Pretty simple. It's just, keeping your file sizes and whatever else and sample rates.
So when does that compress? Does that compress on build or?
On build to my knowledge. Like when you're, like actually doing your final thingamajig, you're packaging it, sorry.
Cool. Is there like
I could be...
import?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Right, no worries,
Sorry.
No worries. I like this. I ask too many questions.
No, that's fine.
Feel free to be like,
No. Ask all the questions. I just may not be able to answer some of the more high-end streaming stuff,
Okay.
right? So this is streaming priority things. Really good if you're having to load a bunch of stuff and you want to be very specifically, this needs to be a higher priority of loading. For streaming is that, but just simple, always be loading this thing. It's crucial. I've never really had a situation where I've been loading so many different audio things at once that's been a problem for me. But if you are, then that's there. This sound group stuff is similar. It's got a couple of different classifications here. Effects, UI, music, voice. Pretty much all these are changing is streaming priority things.
Oh, okay.
So it has an in-base, okay, voice is going to be a higher priority than, effect or whatever. And so that can be really easy to rely on that. And that's what I tend to do. Looping is pretty self-explanatory. Do you want this clip to be able to loop? If you're only just dragging into the scene, it's really crucial. If you're doing fancier things with it, you can set looping settings there. Volume and pitch, don't worry about these. You'll be changing them elsewhere. Class is really important. These are pretty much like your submixes, that your categories you can set things to. So for example, here I have a footsteps class specifically for footstep sounds. Yep, that I've made. And then, but footstep sounds is also already within like effect sounds.
Yep.
So I can be like, I want all effects in the games need to be quieter, or maybe the players changed that volume option themselves. Then that will change that. But I can also be like, no, the footsteps specifically are too loud, and just as once, just go and mix those differently.
Cool.
And you can make as many if you want as these, and they can interact with each other in weird ways and do whatever you like. So this is the sound effects, loading behaviors, that sort of stuff, chunk sizes, subtitle settings if you're doing like dialogue things. But from my knowledge, the like Unreal has a really in-depth dialogue, subtitling, and localization systems. Like it's like really good to just be able to like, it will just handle like, okay, this is the Japanese version of this thing and it's going to do these stuff. I've never used them. I've never needed to, just making little things that I make.
Cool though. Especially
so you've
like,
got that stuff.
Often when making dialogue heavy games, even if you use a middleware, you tend to like, if you've got a lot of dialogue, you still do that on the engine side, like instead of F-modelize. So that is cool. That's great.
It's good, that stuff. Analysis is obviously important if you're doing anything where you're analyzing your own sounds.
Oh, so it's built in.
Yeah, and you can do different kinds of analysis for different things and whatever. So you can pick a specific file to be analyzed. So even though you can do a thing where this is this audio file, but it's actually going to analyze a different audio file.
What?
I don't know why you'd want to do that ever, but I'm sure there's some use case where you're like, actually, this audio file should be analyzing this other audio file and giving it that information.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why, but yeah, and that can also be buses. So if you want to be like, analyze this bus of stuff as opposed to this one.
That's, I mean,
this one file.
So I guess, is that used for like Rumble Pack stuff? Like where you don't really care about the audio, you just care about data?
So here's a situation, like I use it for visualization stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, this fucking car sound is going to be here because I just put a random car sound in the middle of the street. So like here, remember I was posting about like streams and different getting audio stems.
Yeah.
Here I've like gotten that song and I've separated the stems, and this glow effect is just a float that's getting the amplitude of each individual instrument. And then doing that. So like that's sort of what I was using it for. And so obviously as the vocals go away, that's no longer glowing. But obviously you can do a lot cooler things with that information. You can also do, so the good thing about that sort of analysis is it's baked. Like it's happening before play, and so like my game's not constantly checking the audio file of the drums and it's like, oh, it's getting a bit louder, so do this. That's already happening. You can also do runtime sort of analysis and spectralization-y type things. That's very expensive to my knowledge. But it can be useful if you're doing, like, I've seen some people do stealth game stuff where physically if the player makes so much noise, like the noise the players are making are like actual, triggers for different, enemy AI things. But you can do that. So there's that. You've just got generic info stuff. So this has got 2 channels. That's its current sample rate and whatever else. File path, pretty self-explanatory. Debug things. This one's really important. Virtualization mode.
Cool. So
pretty much, yeah. If the sound is not currently being heard, what's happening to it?
Yeah.
So, for example, for the birds, I've got it where if they're not being heard stop playing that sound and restart it when they next get heard. But for music, you want to say, do like play when silent. So that way when the player re-enters that scene, it's not just playing from the start of the song the entire time. Because, yeah, obviously that would fuck up with the chronology of whatever audio things are happening. But something like Atmos, things like these birds, they can just restart. Or we can have them be just disabled entirely and just be like, yeah, no, they're not going to re-trigger it all. Concurrency settings, if you've got like multiple things playing at the same time, what's going to take priority? Are they going to, so this is going to stop voice lines like triggering on top of each other, and any things you're wanting to not happen concurrently. You can do these settings. It's similar to like the loading settings we were looking before, but obviously rather than being focused on loading, it's what's currently playing.
Cool. So that's like a nice little backup. Like, definitely don't allow this to happen, even if I accidentally coded it that way.
Yeah. Totally, and it lets you get a bit more fancy, I guess, with like some of your in-scene audio elements, because you can make sure that like not so many things are happening at once. And when the workshop I'm working on, one of the accessibility things I talk about is letting players adjust concurrency stuff to actually limit the amount of audio sources they're currently hearing.
Such a good point. Cool.
Yeah. And hopefully more in that workshop if I, ever finish writing the script for it. Priority, similar stuff. Effect sources, is it outputting just to a bus? Which source effect chains it going to? Ooh. Those sort of things. Same with submixers. I don't typically adjust any of the attenuation stuff here. I would be doing that somewhere else. Yeah. Modulation settings. I'd be adjusting these things elsewhere. And same with curves. So those are just like, once you input your thing, you can change those. Mostly the things that I'm changing are compression, virtualization, so was it happening when it's not being played, and which of the groups is it falling into? Is it effects? Is it music? Is it whatever else? And the same thing with the subclasses there. Can I move this UI stuff from Zoom somewhere else than the top of the screen? Because that's currently where all my tabs are, and it's just a bit of a time. I'm just gonna do this, and okay. Oh, that's now going onto my other monitor. Because I'm trying to like grab these tabs and just going into the Zoom settings. Would you? So the good thing about adjusting stuff in those settings is if you have a copy, like, of that audio somewhere happening multiple times, all of those will grab that information.
Oh, yeah.
As opposed to if you just edited it on the one you dragged into the scene, then that's only changing that one. But typically you're not really going to be dragging things into the scene. You're going to have them as audio components of an object or whatever else you're doing, right? So here I have this car. It's a wonderful little car.
Hey, car.
It drives around and does things.
What a clever car.
And here's all of its little components, like the doors of it and things like that. But also one of the things is this audio component, which is its engine. And that produces the engine sound. And because that's there and it's attached to those things, it's always part of the car. And in the car's blueprint itself, in the car's code, I can then be calling that information and doing different things with it. So if I go edit blueprint, I apologize for my horrible code, but that's fine. So where do I actually... Yeah, okay. So this car's going cool. At the beginning of the game, if I've sent a boolean saying this is one of the cars that can move in the scene, it's like, cool, proceeds. It does this little custom function, and then it plays the audio, right? So that way all of my cars are not always having their engines on. It's just the cars that I've functionally turned on, right?
Yeah. And then you're playing the audio source rather than
yeah. So it goes into this car engine audio component, and it's like play it, right? Because by default things will be turned on. Auto activate is on by default. So if you've got an audio component there, it will be automatically playing whatever audio you put it on. But in this case of the car, I've turned it off by default for all my cars, and then I manually turn it on here.
Cool.
On only the cars that I want to currently be moving around the world, and all that's having them move around.
So in Unity, that'd be like the play on awake setting.
Yeah. I assume so. It's been a lot of years since I've used Unity.
Okay.
It's been like 4 or 5 years.
I'm just gonna my own sanity then, and for anyone watching who's doing the same thing as I am, moving.
So there's that. I think the next thing I'll cover is sound cues.
Okay.
So often if I'm doing a bit of audio, I'm not calling a specific audio file myself, I'm calling a sound cue, right? So for example, let's go in and look at some of them. Audio files, footsteps will do. Let's say we want footsteps on brick, right? So here I have 6 different brick footstep sounds, right? Obviously, I'm not going to be like, call brick 1, then brick 3, then brick, whatever else. I'm just going to call the brick walk sound effect. And here we have the audio cue system.
So,
audio cue...
Yeah, so when you make an audio cue, does it come with this? This is what it looks like already?
No, it comes blank with just this output.
Okay.
But hey, we can make one now if you like.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. What thing should we make?
How about the birds randomizing?
The birds randomizing. All right, cool.
Or just
so we're gonna go.
I don't know.
I'll do the footsteps one because probably more people will use that, right?
Yeah.
And I can go into detail about my current footstep systems and things like that, but I'll save that for some other time. So to get a sound cue, you want to right-click content. It will give you, here are all the things that you can possibly make in Unreal Engine. Go to sounds. There's like, oh, do you want to do analysis, things like that? No, we just want sound cue, right? Sound cue is super useful because for a lot of audio people and audio programmery people, most of the stuff you're going to be needing to do is in sound cues. And then only if you want to get really fancy with things are you going to need to do stuff in blueprints, right?
Okay.
So I'm just going to call this test. And we're gonna I have lost my things. We're over here. We're gonna open that up, and it's completely blank, right? But what you'll notice is on the side here is all the same settings and a couple of new ones that we were editing before in the file. But they're also here, so we can set this just across everything that's happening in that sound cue. So this is obviously going to be the output of whatever we're playing. And in this case, we're going to want to play some footsteps. So we're just going to select all of these. And then, no, I don't want to copy them. I just want to... If you had these open in different windows, you could do things. But because I have these as just tabs, I'm just going to go there and drag them. And boop, they're there. So, yeah. So these are pretty much little audio blueprints that save you some time doing things, and they've given you a set of like nodes that you'll commonly use.
Oh, lovely.
And then you can only sort of worry about these, and if you're doing more complicated stuff, then you can worry about the more complicated stuff,
Do you
right?
make your own nodes?
Yes, I probably wouldn't be making my own nodes in SoundQ. Because if I needed to make my own nodes, I would be doing that in Blueprints. And Blueprints probably already has whatever I need. But this is like I said, for the most 90% of stuff you'll be doing, right? So I can just quickly go through there. This changes attenuation stuff. You don't really want to be using that because you'll be wanting to do your attenuation things here. This is a branch, so it's checking a Boolean you can set in a blueprint and just be like, cool, if it's true, do this stuff. If it's false, do this stuff, right? And this can save you from having to have two different sound cues that are just being called at different times by just having the same sound cue that's just being called and checking a Boolean.
Okay. But you have different sound cues for your different footstep textures.
Yes.
But you could have had just one sound cue with branches in it?
I could have, but if for what I was doing, it was simpler that way. Both in... So I can actually grab and show you what's happening. So if I go... so the code that's triggering my different footstep system is actually happening in my character's animation blueprint. If I can find that somewhere. This scene itself has been one that I've been migrating around since like Unreal 4.13 or whatever. So finding things can occasionally be a time. I'm also apparently... There we go. So what I'm going to go is the event graph here. All right. So this is how my footstep system is kind of working. And I'll explain why I've got these as different sound cues, right? So on the event of an animation notify of a footstep, so pretty much I've gone through the animations where she walks or runs or does whatever else, and then when I see the foot hitting the ground, I'm like, put a little node there that's like, call a footstep event. Make sure that you can get this character. Then you go to the character movement system, and then I find what the current floor is, right? Which is pretty much doing a raycast down directly to the player. That's not super expensive because it's happening anyway, whether or not you use this system.
Oh, okay.
So, like, you might as well, right? It's not a situation where I'm worried about, like, oh, I'm going to be raycasting this video, because, like, no, it's already getting you that information.
Why? Are you using it for something else, or like?
So that's just inherently within the character movement stuff. Oh. So it's checking different things. It's checking, like, you know, your distance to the ground and things like that, right? So then I check, cool, is this blocking hit? Am I actually touching the ground, right? Oh, yeah. And then I get the hit results, and then I break that off into 2 bits of information. So the first one is surface type, which has to do with like physics materials and stuff, which I can go into later. This doesn't need to be here anymore. And the other one is the actual location of where I stepped, right? And then I'm like, cool, get that surface type, and it pulls up this big sort of select node of all my different possible materials it could be, from just a default, I don't know what it is, to freaking a bouncy castle, right? I haven't made all of these sound cues, but it's useful just to like have them there, and then I can like put them in there if I want to. And then it's like, cool, which one of these was it that I walked on? And then it's playing that sound cue. So as opposed to me
here?
So yeah, so see how I've got like wood, and it's wood walk. That's the sound cue that it's selecting.
Cool.
And then it's going, hey, let's play that sound at the location of where the footstep was.
Ooh.
So it's all spatialized and nice. Yep. But yeah, you could do this as one massive sound cue with all of your footsteps across every possible surface type, but I just find it easier to separate it this way.
Yeah, how interesting.
So going back to this little sound cue. We've got concentrator. Pretty much it's play sequentially, right? Okay, cool. So do this one, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one. I don't have, I think in this game, many sound cues that are playing different audio simultaneously. But I have had sound cues in games before I've built for like Atmos or different things where I'm like, cool, it's playing this sound and it's also playing this sound and it's also playing this sound, and that's all coming into the one output, right?
But
Um,
so sequentially, does that mean once this sound is finished, play the next one, or does it?
yes.
Okay, cool. So it's like a playlist.
Yeah.
Okay.
You've got a continuous modulator, so that's obviously going to be modulating pitch and volume constantly.
Cool.
Not just
Is
once.
it like a sine wave
Cross...
or something? Or...
Yeah, I think so.
There's the
you can change the parameters and things like that all here.
Oh.
And you can go that.
So do you do that with your footsteps? Like have a little bit of pitch randomization?
Yes. So what I do there is I wouldn't use a continuous modulator because that would change it as the sound is being played.
Oh yeah.
But if I have I've got this little modulator node here that's like, cool, pitch minimum, pitch maximum, volume minimum, volume maximum.
Nice.
And then that's just there just to get a little bit more randomization other than my 6 sources, right? There was one game I was working on where I didn't have many audio sources I could use. And so I just had to really push modulation hard and to try to get as many different things. And the good thing about this, it's only happening the one time, right? So it's being like, shoop, all right, I modulate that, then I output.
Cool.
We've got crossfade by distance, delay. I think those are pretty self-explanatory. Doppler, enveloper, group control. So that's, plays different sounds depending on the number of active sounds.
What? Say it again.
Plays different sounds depending on the number of active sounds. Anytime a new sound is played, the first group has an available slot will be chosen.
So if that's when you're like, I always want 10 sounds, or...
Yeah, you could do it that way. Like I said, I would probably do those in concurrency.
Yeah.
And in those other settings, but you can do it there. And if you've got a really complex sound cue, right, then like that's that. So say like I've got a RPG and I've got like a shop, right? Yeah. And say I'm being silly and this entire shop is being run off one sound cue where I've got the sound of someone crafting something in the back room and I've got the sound of, other shoppers talking and I've got and I'm doing that all within one sound cue for some reason. I don't even know why I'd want to do that.
Why not?
But that's where you could use that.
So is it because the audio source would all be in one place? Like, why wouldn't you do it?
Yes.
Okay, that's why.
The audio source would all be in one place there, yeah. Okay. It's also, it's harder to adjust that stuff if they're all together.
Cool.
Right? So that we've got looping. That's separate from, this actual clip just looping. So say if I've got a bit of music looping, that's going to go and be like, hey, yeah, if I'm playing the brick walk sound, I'm just going to keep playing that brick walk sound
yeah.
It's just going to keep doing that. Versus this looping, which is saying I'm actually going to loop this entire sequence and have that keep happening. And I can also set how many times that happens.
Cool.
So indefinitely, or I'm like, actually, I just want you to loop this 5 times and then stop.
Yeah.
So for the sparrow sound cue, for the sparrows, they're going to keep making those noise, right?
Oh, yeah, it's got looping right at the end.
So it's got it right at the end after it's done all the things. I'm like, hey, keep doing all these things before it.
So when you play Q or trigger this, it will just
so I can hit play Q now.
Oh, look at it go! So cute.
And see how it's calling different ones and things. It's got a delay here, so that's why it's got a randomization time, because I don't just want to be like, hey, play a sound. I'm like, give me a random amount of delay before you play a different bird sound again.
And then
right?
when you press stop, do you have an on stop? Can you do things that happen when you press stop? So when the blueprint or the script or whatever says, okay, stop this sound cue, can you do things then too?
Yes, you can. you could probably, what I would do with that is I would use a switch or a branch up here and have a Boolean.
Oh, yeah.
And then be like, oh, cool, set true. Now I'm actually doing these things, right? But in my scene, I kind of have a very janky case of that, right? So say we got our, fucking, I'm going to get rid of this car sound because it's just going to bother me. Where are you? You're over here. Goodbye forever, please. It's got a random engine in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
All right. So we got birds and the different trees and things. These are here to be just part of the Atmos, but they are like spatialized, right? And say in a situation you're wanting to, because it's dynamic, right? It's not just an audio file of Atmos. I can do, if certain things happen in the game, it changes. So say hypothetically we got like a big explosion that scares all the birds. They all go and fly away. And now they're not playing anymore.
Cool.
And now they're just gone from the scene.
Yeah.
So you can totally do that sort of more complicated stuff with it, right? Where it's not just like, oh, this is my Atmos. It's all together making the Atmos, and then I can adjust that dynamically based on game events.
So you'd probably use a Boolean. Rather than like stop events, which some other like middlewares use.
You can just call a stop. I think I do actually do it in the phase character here. Make birds go away. Yeah. So that's, it's a very important comment.
Yeah.
So I play the 2D sound of the explosion. It's not spatialized anywhere. I don't have an audio component. I'm just like, just play a 2D sound, right? Same reason you can be like play sound at location, which I think I do somewhere. No, I don't do that here. But you can also just call like, hey, play a sound at location, and you can either manually give it a location or just be like, be at the location of this other thing.
Yeah, and because it has all of those settings on the file itself, like there is a lot of settings already there.
Yeah. So this is then getting all the actors of the class of the Sparrow Sound Cube blueprint. It's then doing a for each loop. So it's going through each of them. It's being like, hey, set that sound that you were playing to now be a different sound that's fly away. So in that case, I don't even have a Boolean or anything to change it. I'm just manually saying the sound that you currently have it be this other sound instead, right? And in this case, it's not even another sound, it's another sound cue.
Wow.
So I'm like, have be this sound cue instead. And then get your current location of wherever I put that bird in the scene, break whatever the vector that is, go up 100 into the sky. Blueprints is in centimeters. So if it's 1,000, that's 1,000 centimeters, right? Then recombine that into a vector, and then I'm like, hey, those birds, they should fly up into the sky 1,000 centimeters above where they were currently, as they're making that sound.
Cool.
Obviously, if you're doing this properly, you would not just program thing to go up, but for what I was needing as a demonstration, it's fine.
Yeah.
Where are we? Okay, so we're here. So I forget what the mature one is. What's this? Oh no, I'm not worried about that.
Never. That's 18 plus. We're too little.
Yeah, absolutely. Mixer is the super useful one. Obviously, if you're mixing different sounds, you'll put them in there, and then you can manually change the input volume of each of them. So you're like, actually, I want like a mini mixer just for like that moment, and then you can have that feed into a mixer somewhere else, and this is all feeding into several other things. So
because this all feeds into the buses that we talked about earlier. So it's like
so this is all feeding into master, but I'd actually want hypothetically for this one to go into sound effects, or I could like set even further iteration, right? I'm like, I could be like birds, sound effects, master, right? And you can just have that hierarchy of how you're editing things. You've got modulation, which we actually already went through. Super helpful. Oscillation, quality level, if you're wanting to like adjust things to be a higher or lower level. random, which I'm sure, as you'll know, will be super most useful like all the time.
Yeah, pretty much always.
Pretty much always, right? Sound class is I think I just you can override what kind of sound class it is. So I'm like, actually, this is gonna pull the information from my music sound class. Switches, it's the same sort of thing as the Boolean branch, but you're getting a parameter.
Yep.
So you can be like, actually, if I get a 2 here, play the second one. I struggle with these ones a little bit. I'm still not super confident in them. Getting this information into the sound queue, I've found a bit difficult at times. Like you can set the parameter. It's just something I've struggled with in the past.
Sure.
Wave parameter, and then just a wave player, which is the same as these things that we just dragged in.
As in wave files.
Yeah, as in wave files. And then obviously comments
Cool.
for if you've got really complicated sound cues, which I don't have in this scene, but I have certainly in previous ones where I've got massive sound cues that are doing this, that, and whatever. So that's sound cues. If you're wanting to do simple audio stuff, that's just going to be great, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not having to worry about as complicated things, you can just worry about that. And most of the time, you're probably not going to want to call a specific audio file. You're going to want to call a sound cue. Might be instances where I'm like, I want a bit of music, where I'm not going to bother with a sound cue.
No, why
but
not?
most of the
like
if it's just like a 2D bit of music that I'm just going to have be playing constantly.
Just like one loop that doesn't change at all.
Yeah, that doesn't change. I'm not going to worry about it. I can still get information and tell that to start and stop.
Okay.
You know.
So if you had a playlist of music, then you would use the sequential the sequential thing.
Yeah. I would probably use the branch. And the parameter, and that way players could also select it themselves if they wanted to.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
But yeah, you could do that. You can also do it in blueprints and be like, I've got lots of different files, play this one, then this one, then this one, then this one. Whatever. Like with any engine, there's 5,000 different ways to do the same thing. Yeah. All right. What else should I chat about? Let's actually go through some important audio settings. These are the settings that are going to be on. So here I've got my trombone, and here it has its little audio component, right? And what I'm going to do now is go through these settings that can either be adjusted on each individual thing or just in the blueprint of the thing. So if for some reason I had multiple trombones all throughout the scene, I could either change those individually here, or I can edit them in the blueprint and change them for all of the trombones.
So when you put an audio component into the scene, it comes with a blueprint?
No. So what's a thing? This trash can, right? It's just an actor within the scene. It doesn't have a blueprint attached to it. There is no code attached to this object. It can still do basic stuff like collision or other things that I'm wanting to set it, but there's no programming associated. I can still add an audio component to that.
Okay.
Right? Cool. What can be useful is if it is a blueprint, it's easier to call to. So if you've got things that are referencing it and like other blueprints that are talking to each other, they don't need to be a blueprint, but it's better if they are, right? Because it's just easier to access that information.
Okay.
So, for example, my sparrows are blueprints instead of just straight sound cues because it just makes it slightly easier for me to get information to them and from them.
Right.
Because you can... got my phase player character here with my make birds get away. I can be like, get all actors of class this blueprint.
Yeah.
And then I can just like, it's just easier for me to get that information. If I'm going here, what is this? It's a bin 24, right? So I could get all actors of the bin right? But it just makes it a bit more finicky, right?
Yeah. So when you're an audio engineer working in Unreal, you should go
Yeah.
across not only like the sound cues and stuff, but a little bit of blueprints.
Yeah. I think you can probably manage with just sound cues. The
So if it
blueprints
was just
is
sound cues, then you
yeah.
would be telling the programmer, play this sound cue at that point, or whatever.
It depends if it's something that's just within the scene, then you just do it yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because you know that if it's something that's going to need to change and trigger and things like that, then then you'll need to go into blueprints. The advantage of blueprints is like super easy to use. Like I'm not really a programming person, and I manage blueprints fine. And blueprints are intentionally designed so different mediums can all collaborate really easily with each other. Like, so your artists can work with your audio people, can work with your programmers. So I wouldn't be afraid of blueprints, but if you're, depending on what you're needing to do, you may have to use them, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Anyway, going back to what we're chatting about. So it's got this trombone. I can edit the settings here, or in the blueprint itself of the trombone. If I edit it here, these are all the exact same settings. Oh my god, my horrible code. Look away. I have like really nice code that I could be showing off, but I'm not, apparently. This obviously will change with every instance of that blueprint.
Okay, right.
Because you're physically changing what the object is itself, versus if I edit it in the scene here, I'm only changing that one.
Right.
Which in the situation where I've only got one trombone in the entire scene, that doesn't make a difference. Functionally, they're the same thing. But it can be good to know because you don't want a situation where you've gone and made a bunch of changes and you've got to copy them across to the blueprint, right? So first off, we're going and we're in our audio thing, so it's just telling us the audio information. We've got what sound is being played. All right, so this is the sound file it's playing. It's not a sound cue in this situation because it's always going to be that sound file.
There's
and
no point.
you know, because it's looping, there's no point. Override subtitle priority is UI sound, means it's 2D, but it also can mean that it will be playing during you mucking around with the editor.
Oh, okay, cool.
Which can be like there. If you want to have stuff happening, you can always just be like simulate here. And then I've got all my editor controls as the scene is just running.
Right, cool.
So I don't really use is UI sound at all, but that's there. Yeah. Volume settings, default volume higher, enveloper settings if you're doing more like this source effect kind of stuff where I'm getting information from it. Pitch multipliers.
So here in
attenuate.
So you have the pitch multiplier and stuff. That's just like a once-off setting. Like you can't do any like automation-y stuff in here.
You could, because you can change that. Right? So so I'd be like, grab this audio component, right? So that is the thing, and I'm like pitch, right? And then it's like, hey, set the pitch multiplier. And then it's this value, right? If I wanted to have that like continually happening, like it's slowly changing throughout the song or whatever, you'd create timelines, which are fancy and really cool, and I don't have time to go into. Those are really great. So yeah, you can do that. So if you're just like, one-off pitch multiplier, I don't know, something's happened and now the music needs to be suddenly really down, you can just do that there really easily and quickly. What has happened here? What's this about? Why are you giving me like a Star Wars lines? I don't know what that's about. Hello? Are you okay? Well, what's happened? I don't know. I don't know. It's not even letting me click on things.
No, what's this weird
What's
frame?
happened? I think it's like a palette. Did I ever click a thing? I don't know. I'm just gonna close this and open it again.
Yeah. It didn't do it on anything else. It's fine.
Yep. Alrighty
Great.
then. Let's get rid of this. Okay. So here you got your attenuation settings. Allow spatialization will be on by default. So your sounds will be spatialized by default. There's a really good test scene that's available on the Unreal Marketplace, which is just a bunch of different spatialization engines. And then you can choose your preferred one, because there's like the Oculus one, there's the Google one, there's the default Unreal one. I use Steam Audio more as a force of habit at this point than anything else. But you've got that one.
Cool. So someone made that test scene. Good on them.
Yes.
That's so nice.
I think it was an Unreal one like that they put out, but yeah.
Okay.
Here you've got attenuation settings. You can set an attenuation file type, and then just have lots of things use the same attenuation settings.
So like a little preset or something.
Yeah, like a preset. Cool. I don't typically do that a lot, just because I'm a bit finicky and perfectionist, and I like everything to be like a little however I want it, right?
I use heaps of presets.
Yeah, that's fine. That's completely fine. I have override attenuation on. That tick box just for me is like use the Steam Audio attenuation stuff instead of the default Unreal things.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, when you implement Steam Audio here, it doesn't like destroy Unreal's attenuation.
No, it doesn't, right? And for like, if I'm wanting to do both in the same scene, I can.
Okay. Cool.
Low pass filter. If you just want to slap a low pass filter on something, you can. You can turn it on and off, which can be useful.
There's no high pass filter?
There's not.
Why?
Like you could, I don't know, Maize.
Weird.
Yeah, totally. And like you can do one. It's just not as inherently built in, and I don't know why.
Okay.
But yeah, that can be on if you just want to slapdash something on there. Attachment rules. You probably won't ever be worrying about this, but there can be situations where you want to attach and detach the audio from its thing.
Right.
So I can be like, I don't know when I would ever use this, but like if there's at some point that you want to be like, actually the audio of the trombone and the trombone itself should be split off from each other and doing different things, you can detach them. Attenuation distance, this is something you probably muck around with a bit. Enable volume attenuation, so as you're getting further away from something, it's going to be attenuating the volume. Attenuation functions, this is a bunch of really great presets that are going to be the style of attenuation. So linear is a bit generic. Logarithmic's really great for gameplay stuff, so like if you're getting close to that thing and you really want the player to be paying attention to it, you can be like, bam, logarithmic one. Each of these has a different use. There's a really good Unreal documentation on when and why you would use different ones of these, so I'd probably just go look at that. Natural sound is the one that best emulates real life. Attenuation at max. So I can be like, at the furthest away point, it will be negative 60 decibels. Right? So functionally it's muted. Attenuation shape. Sphere, capsule, box, or cone. Sphere's your default one. Capsule, I don't think there would be... I can't think of a lot of situations where I'd use capsule. Maybe it's like a train or something. Box is really good if you want to do like audio zone stuff.
Right, okay.
So for example, in this scene, I've got this little like burger place here, right? And as I walk into it, it's sort of got that playing.
So here you have like a box collider or
yeah, so here's my little audio thing, and you can physically see the box itself.
Okay.
And there'll be two boxes. The inner box, which is like you'll definitely be hearing it, and this is the fall off distance.
Oh wow! So it has like this whole area. So the audio doesn't come from a single point. It's this whole area.
Yeah, it's this entire box. So in that situation, I have just a generic Atmos of like a burger place. And because that's already got really nice left-right stuff happening in the file itself with its panning, I don't really want to fuck around and spatialize that too specifically, because then it would be like, oh, it's weird that the entire burger place is coming from that one spot in the middle of the room.
Yeah.
So I can just be like, yeah, this entire zone will be a neutral point,
Oh
right?
my gosh, so good.
This is a case where I've got a really sharp fall off distance. Because I'm like, yeah, don't want the sound of that really going above this point. But if we compare it to something like the trombone, that has a much larger circular fall off distance, where that inner cone is like, yeah, that's right, and nice and sweet, and then as far away from here is where you'll begin to start hearing it.
Cool. And then wow. Yeah. And so you can alter the size of the sphere here in the scene?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So if I go to my audio component, you've got to remember what these settings are, Maize, because I'm going to change them back again.
No, I'm not remembering that.
Oh no. So I can manually change those.
Okay, cool.
And I can also change the inner radius.
Okay.
This was like 400.
And then so for the cube one, though, you wouldn't want to use those numbers in the description there. You would want to be able to actually move the cube.
Yeah, you can do both.
Cool.
So in this case, I could physically move this audio component around, or I can just change these, which are the exerts of the cube, and be like around about here and here, and you can just do both.
Cool.
Either or works. So that's attenuation stuff.
Yeah.
Cone is really cool if you're doing speakers.
Yeah.
If you're doing stuff that you only want attenuated in one direction, that can be really nice.
You can see the cone in the scene.
Yes.
So good.
So I have a scene where I can actually show that off because I have a speaker. Third person. No, it's not in there.
So so it has it's a speaker. Can you do behind the cone? Or
yeah. So you can. I'll get there. Here's a much older audio scene that's not as pretty looking.
Wow, it really isn't.
Yeah, I know, right? Thanks. But so here's my cone of my speaker, which is this plank of wood, apparently. So the circle is you can begin to hear anything.
Uh-huh.
This sort of yellow circle is this is where you'll be hearing the sound. And you'll notice I've got that a little bit behind the speaker itself, right? So if you're wanting to do that, you can do that. And then if you're in this thing, you're in the sweet spot of that speaker, in that inner cone there.
And then, so with the attenuation, is it just volume, or is there a nice little low pass or something on there as well? Or?
I'm getting to that.
All right.
I'll just do the speaker while we're talking about it. Let's come there. So you've got your spatialization settings here. So enable spatialization, binaural, your binaural radius, non-spatialized radius, 3D stereo sped, and normalized 3D stereo sounds, which is really important. Pretty much what that does is it stops the sound clipping if it's swapping ears.
Oh, okay, cool.
And things like that.
Yep.
And yeah, it just makes any binaural stuff just infinitely more comfortable to work with. So by default, I tick that on. So here we have enable air absorption, which is what you're talking about, which is sort of attenuation by low and high pass, right? So here we've got our distances, low pass cutoffs, high pass cutoffs, And this is, so this is as you're further away, the frequency itself is changing based on the distance.
Sweet. So cool.
Unreal Engine. It's a time. There are things.
Yeah, there's so much built in.
Yeah.
So good.
So that's when you can be altering that. Same reason you can make custom curves or just do it linearly. You can do, because you can turn this on and off and you can adjust all these settings in a blueprint, you could do a thing where it gets foggy or something, and that's going to be absorbing more frequencies, and you can have that happen a bit more dynamically. The good thing about any of these settings is you can change them on the fly in real time.
Cool.
So that's that. Modulation, you've got more modulation here if you just want to set it just on that thing. So I'm like, oh, even though all these birds in the scene are great, there's this one bird I really don't like, and that's going to be modulated differently. And so even if my sound cue is still playing the same sound cue, I can be like, but that one actor is going to sound a bit different.
Sure, yeah.
And
like,
enable.
Sometimes we're like, actually going to go back into my DAW or my audio editor and I'm just going to fix it. Or we're like, no, I'm going to do it here in the game engine. Yeah, no, my big goal is to like stay as in engine as possible, right? Right.
And because I can do so much from within the engine, it's just nice to being able to do that dynamically. So there's modulation. You can also do modulation presets. If you're big on presets, you're like, actually, all these things.
Big on
presets. Enable listener focus is not something I use a lot. It's other people use a lot. Pretty much what it is it means the things that you're looking at are gonna sound louder.
Cool.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's looking directly at there, and then you can change like the zenith of the different things of like how quickly is it going to sort of decay once you stop looking at a thing. It's those kind of settings.
That's cool.
If you're like focusing on a specific item, like maybe it's a telephone that's ringing, you can be like, cool, if they're looking at that telephone, it's going to get louder, right?
That's great. There was someone in the Mixed Signals Discord asking about this.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't tend to use it that much, but it's there.
Like if you're making audio-only games and it's still in 3D and you want the player to be able to know which way they're facing. Like,
that's a really good example of when you'd use it. Attenuation, reverb stuff. So you can send out actual reverbs.
Is the reverb very good? Like, do you like Unreal's reverb?
I've not experimented with it in a lot of depth.
So Steam Audio must have its own reverb.
Yeah.
So you just turn this off.
So I'm not really worrying about this as much. Concurrency settings, we've already been over those. Occlusion settings. So here, also nice little footsteps on different physics materials.
Hells yeah.
So walking all the way over here. Sorry, it's as far away. I've got the sound of two parents arguing. And then if I'm hiding behind the wall, it's occluded.
Cool. And so does it just offer visibility?
So, you can adjust that yourself and independently for each object. You can do visibility, which is the one you're going to be doing most of the time. Or you can do base off types of things in your scene, right? So every actor in Unreal has a specific classification, whether it's being like a world static element, a world dynamic element, a pawn, camera, physics body, and things like that. So visibility is just anything that's visible, but you might be like, cool, worry about the occlusion if it's only the pawns, or like for some reason if you wanted like any of these, right? you can just do it only those. So it can be like, oh, it's actually not occluded by pawns of other players, but it is occluded by the geometry of the world, right?
And then can you make more of these types? Like if you're like, well, this.
I believe so. Yes. I believe you could. I've not, because this sort of system is used a lot with the collision system. So it's like, oh, cool. Can this object collide with world static, world dynamic pawns, things like that? Is it blocking those? So it's more a part of that system, but I think you can make more of them, for as far as I know. I actually, you can. I have done it before. I was just not the programmer on that project.
Great, cool.
So yes, I haven't done it, but you totally can.
Yes.
And
can you check more than one?
No, I don't think so. But when you're making them, you can have them include more than one thing. If that makes sense. So you've got occlusion to play a low pass filter on top of things when it's occluded. The default for this is like way too high. It's like 20,000, which is barely noticeable amount of occlusion. I feel like they got the math wrong for that or something.
It's just a weird default.
Yeah, it's a really odd default, and like because I like to really exaggerate that my game has occlusion, I typically have like an 800 hertz like low pass filter or something. like I'm like, you gotta know this is occluded, right? Then volume attenuation. So if you want to have stuff occluded by frequency but not by volume, you can do that, or vice versa. Then you've got use complex collision for occlusion. Pretty much what that's doing is it's just doing more dynamic and more expensive checks on the occlusion. So for example, if I can find my way back to the map we were on before, the way I do, no, don't save anything here, please. The way I do the wind in this scene, right, is I have actors that are playing the wind in the sky. Right, you can kind of, here, I'll turn up a bit. You kind of, fucking birds, destroy, go away, birds. All right. Let that car go away and topple off the cliff there. Goodbye. So you can hear this wind, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And it's just gonna keep doing that.
So funny.
It goes from over there, and then it pops up all the way over there. And it just keeps going. Is that I've got the sky coming from spatialized things in the actual sky. So if I'm like jumping and flying above things, that wind is gonna get really loud as I go higher. And like, even though that's not costing me anything, I'm not having to load or do any sort of dynamic crossfades by distance. It's just getting louder. Oop, I hit the explosion button. So you can do that, but this would be a situation where I don't want to do a lot of dynamic checking for occlusion.
Because it's just huge in the sky.
It's just huge and in the sky, right? Yeah. But it means because I am still doing it, that if I go into this bank over here, right, it's just immediately gonna get quieter.
Cool.
You know? While I'm here, it's just a fun thing, but it's quite easy to change what the listeners are in Unreal Engine. So the actual point the game is listening for. So I have a button where I send out an orb, and that orb is what the listener
funny.
is.
That'll be good.
But yeah, it's because like it's literally just an object that I've attached the listener to, and then I'm like, just go and listen to that from that object's perspective.
Yeah. In Unity, if you have more than one listener, it throws some errors, but it does try to work with it. It just sort of like jitters between the two.
Right, gotcha.
How do you do it in Unreal? So, like doing that, did you deactivate the listener?
So I overrid the original one, right? So by default, it will be on the camera. Occasionally, I like it to be on my character's head position, depending on the game I'm doing. If I'm doing something that's a lot slower paced, I feel like that can be better, but that's just a personal thing. Where am I? Where is the code? Here we go. Left click to audio probe. So I'm like, hey, spawn a listener probe, which is a different object that I made. And that listener probe is like, when it's created, override the listener to be me. Right? And then I have, when I let go of the left mouse button, destroy that listener probe and set the listener to just be what its default is, which is the camera.
Yeah, right. Cool.
And then, you could totally do multiple and toggle between them. You just have to, I think, turn them on and off again, because it's not like multiple at once. You're just overriding them.
Yeah.
So I'd probably just do the most recent one that you've done.
Yeah. How does Unreal react if you do have more than one listener in the scene?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, because listeners aren't like an object type.
Yeah.
In this, if that makes sense. So yeah, I don't know if you could do multiple. Like, you can do multiple objects in the scene and then toggle the listener to those locations.
Right.
I don't know if you could physically put multiple listeners in the scene at the same time. I don't know if that's possible.
Right. Interesting. Cool. They've just been like, no.
Yeah.
Cool.
You can have like analyzing things, which are like listeners but not for player sound.
Yeah, right.
So like, yeah, you could do it. I don't know. I've not experimented with that.
That's all right. It's like such a common thing in Unity, because you have the default listener on the camera, and then you make a player, and then you're like, why isn't my spatialization working? And then you realize it's because you have two
gotcha. Right, yeah.
Cool.
Then, so that's occlusion, attenuation, priority, replication stuff's just on anything. Auto activate is pretty on by default. Your audio will automatically play. You can turn that not to be automatically playing. And then it's just sending, and you can make manual custom events for things that are happening with the audio.
What's cooking?
Right? Cooking is like, it's processing the things, if that makes sense.
Right.
Where are you looking for cooking?
Just above events.
Events.
Cooking.
Oh, right, yeah. So like, that can be like baking stuff. Right. So if you're baking, so you can do your audio being like, it's editor only. It's only I and the listener to it.
Okay, interesting.
And yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and then events. Cool.
Events. So yeah, you can manually just set up these triggers to be like, on audio finished, fucking print that you are the greatest.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know.
I love it. That's great. That's so
when audio's reached a certain percent.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, so I can be like, the song's halfway through, trigger an event, that's going to make the bad guy step out into the scene or something, right?
Oh my God. Cool.
And because that's based off the audio, if you change things and like, actually the audio is slower now because the player's doing a thing, then that will trigger later, right?
I love
envelope stuff, physics volumes changed, and when the audio is activated or deactivated.
Cool.
And yeah, and you can also turn on collision for your audio if you want, like, your AI to avoid your audio things.
Right.
You can do that. It's not, you never would.
Yeah, like,
but you can turn on collision for your audio things.
Cool.
And yeah, so those are all the settings.
I love it.
Cool. Anything else that you might want to know?
I have one question. One more,
Okay.
and then I think we're done.
Yeah.
So you have all of your stems on the different instruments.
Yes.
Do you have anything to make sure that they do all actually start at the same time?
So
how you dealing? Do you deal at all like with when they load or anything? So they're definitely at the same time.
Yeah, so I haven't needed to for this one, but you totally can. So part of that, you can be changing the file settings. Part of it is there are two different kind of blueprint environments. So you've got your default blueprint, that's your event graph, right? And then you've also got your construction script, which is running right when the game's being constructed and will happen before any event graphs do, right?
Cool.
The usefulness of this is it's really normal for me when I'm programming something, and I'm not a good programmer, so this is probably not the correct way to do it, but to be like, cool, at the beginning of play, you object learn something about some other object, right? Like learn a variable from this other object that I've set. That can be a problem if that variable hasn't been set yet.
Yeah.
Because they're both happening simultaneously. So you can set one tap in the construction script and one tap in the event graph. Another thing is loading priorities and things like that. You can do a thing where you prime a sound cue.
Oh, yeah.
So if I've never needed to do this, it's never been a problem for me. But so let's go keyboard spacebar, why not? You can go prime sound or prime sound cue for playback, and then be like, hey, when this is done loading, trigger this new event, which I'm just going to create now as a custom event that will do a thing with the loaded sound wave or whatever.
That's cool. I really like that.
Yeah, I've not needed to. Like everything has happened well enough for me that like I've never had to worry about the desyncs from loading. But I can understand on different components and different things, like loading times differ radically and things like that. So what you can do is you can make sure that they are all loaded, and then they're triggering play off the same event.
Yeah.
And that will guarantee that will happen. Yeah. Right. And yeah, that can be a sound that you can prime a sound cue if you need to. And yeah, that just is making sure it's loaded, right? So I can be, I guess a common use for that is if I've got a silly sound cue that's the entire Atmos for a scene, right? I can be like, cool, the player's walking down this corridor, load that really fancy sound cue because it's going to need to play soon, right?
Yeah.
And of course, the engine will do that itself once it gets to that area. It'll be like, okay, I'm playing the sound cue. But if you need to guarantee that it knows to load it earlier, you can do that.
Cool. Yeah, I'm just very, whenever you have like a rhythm game or music game or something, you're just a bit like, oh God. You hope for the longest time, but then eventually it's like, all right, things are going out of sync. Then slowly going out of sync.
But yeah, I was just like walking around these and just like hearing the different spatialization. Like, no, I want to focus on the drums.
Yeah, the player is a DJ. That's what I've said forever. Players are DJs.
But yeah, so that was why I was asking about that in the group chat.
Yeah, right.
Because I didn't have any stems available, and my music is atrocious. I'm not a musician at all. So I was like, does anyone have these that I can use?
Yeah. When I was teaching, I always used Radiohead stems because they've done a few rounds where they've just released all the stems of their albums. So cool. Good on them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, obviously, like if you've got stems for your audio, you can do a lot more cool dynamic stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like loops and things like that. I'm not going to cover this because we're getting fancier. Yeah.
But some of the things that we can do in Unreal Engine with audio that I have not covered. So we can do synthesizers and like actual in-engine modular synthesizers.
Cool.
Here are just like sound utilities, visualization plugins. Here are all the different like modularization stuff and things like that. Doing DSP effects.
Cool.
Time synth. Okay, I've never actually done time synth myself, but it sounds like the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
So I'm going to see if I can find someone else's demo for time synth.
There is someone in the Discord also who's been using time synth.
I've been doing time synth.
Yeah.
Just in the sense of can you just not? Thank you.
Welcome to this
but time synth just being like, cool, play a synth or a sound file to a certain amount as things are happening, right? So the classic example is doors, which I've seen people use. They've got a creaky door, and as the door is opening, it's playing a bit of that like, right? But that's physically based on the physics that is being applied to that door. It's not playing an audio file. It's just doing that bit of it.
Yeah, right.
And then, for example, if you pull the door back suddenly, like it's a VR game, then it would just do that quickly, right?
Cool. It's like a grain synth.
Yeah, it's super fancy and cool. I've not had a chance to muck around with it yet. And like the application outside of doing really dynamic doors for some reason, is that
could be like
there is some other stuff
for like bullets or something, maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, you can do lots of cool things with time synth. There's some MIDI stuff in Unreal, but I don't love it, to be honest. Unreal can take MIDI devices really easily. It can't really do a lot of things with MIDI files.
What about OSC stuff?
What's that?
OSC?
I'm not as familiar.
Never mind. Yeah, it's like another thing that a lot of people who like to use a lot of MIDI also tend to move to OSC. Another UDP thing.
Gotcha. So like this is a game I made ages ago, sort of like a game a week thing that I built, where I just wanted to get like a MIDI keyboard working in Unreal Engine, right? I just realized my MIDI piano is one on the other side of the room and two not turned on at the moment.
Nice wolf.
But thank you. It's just a marketplace asset.
Nice.
I won't worry about that right now. But so then I've got that MIDI component going into this keyboard that's going the synth and it's playing the specific frequency of the thing that I want.
Cool.
Right? Yeah. Per the key. And then it's also got fun velocity things where the velocity of the note determines how bright this wolf glows.
Oh, nice.
And just some other things. And then I've got like here I've just got like just random tones coming from the synth, and I'm like, I want to change what the synth is, like triangles, and I've manually built all these synths myself.
Yeah.
To be like different things. But yeah,
it's cool.
It's also got all that fun.
Yeah, Unreal already knows all of those different bits of the MIDI.
But yeah, so like I've done that. MIDI is a bit frustrating to work with in Unreal, in my experience. I was trying there was like a game jam where I wanted to do MIDI as like a control input. Where I was like, well, if I can get a MIDI event that the key's being played, I can assign that to walk. And it was just like, oh my god.
Oh, damn.
I just gave up after a couple of days. And it's pro-read really poorly, but like that Wolf keyboard game is like each note is like got its own programming on pressed and released, and it's just a nightmare.
Okay. So it's not.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not good.
Yeah.
It's there, but it's not great. What I've more seen people doing is using MIDI controllers to control things in Unreal.
Yeah. It's really common across like Photoshop and film editing and anything where people like sliders and knobs.
Yeah. So like here's example of a human who's got like a procedural MIDI fan from a synthesizer, and then he's like controlling that by that knob there.
Classic nano controller.
Yeah. And like for me, I'm like, I'd love to make a game or for like an installation type thing, which is just like, yeah, you just have those knobs and like, even if it's like that fan game's like, cool, that's your control input, right?
Yeah.
For the game.
Like
You know, you
Panoramical, right? Which is also using that nanocorg originally.
Right, yeah. But yeah, so I can do that stuff. I've just, not had a good experience with it.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's some Unreal Audio things.
Amazing. This was a really great look through. Thanks so much.
That's all right.
Definitely gotten over any blank page syndrome that I was worried about. So I'm very like, great.
Yeah. I guess the only other thing I haven't covered is audio volumes, which is a kind of class that you can put around the place. It's just a box or whatever shape you want it to be that can have a specific reverb type in it. So I can be like, for my stairwell, I'm going to have an audio volume that's going to have like a really intense, reverb.
I love it.
And things like that. And you can do things there. One thing I'd really want is, rather than having to use attenuation things, being able to use audio volumes to be like, play sound in this space.
Yeah.
Those features are covered by the attenuation, as I showed you by the but it's just, it would have been nice to be able to be like, cool, that. But yeah, and you can have sub things in there, so you can have like your entire scene is inside of an audio volume, but this room is a different one, right? But yeah, I guess that's the last thing to mention.
Cool. So like, just on that, you play this sound inside this area.
Yeah.
That is covered by the attenuation settings, but just if you were like, so when the player goes into this, start this sound, that would be like a blueprints type thing.
No? Because remember at the beginning when we were going through audio files, we can say their virtualization.
Yeah.
So you can have that constantly, it's constantly there, right? But it's just not playing that audio. Like, this is constantly playing, but until I'm physically within the range of it, it's not going to start loading it, right? So you don't have to worry about manually triggering for it to play.
Sick. I love it.
Yeah. Because that would be a nightmare, right?
Well, that's how everything else works. That's how like every middleware works.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you'll have to show me more middleware things, because I feel like there's a massive hole in my knowledge, just because I've like been able to just use Unreal stuff for so long now.
Yeah.
That like I feel like I need to definitely get into Wise or Fmod at some point and muck around.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do a workshop with Tig. We're going to go through like, here's all your stuff in your DAW, and then we're going to put it into Wise. Because they're on PC. So I was like, yes, we can do Wise. If we're on Mac, cool. Like, no.
Yeah, fair enough. Those are all the things.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
That's all right. I'm glad it was helpful.
Yeah.
Unreal Engine's audio is good. Like, I like it. There's a couple of bits which are just have things that are really outdated. Like there's just stuff which is legacy that probably shouldn't be around anymore. Like here's like our different classes that we mentioned before, and I think did they finally get rid of it? Maybe. Maybe it's in here. Okay, they did finally get rid of it. But it was like in one of these scenarios of like a submix or something, and it just had like, do you want to put a telephone filter on this? I'm like, why is this setting here?
Yeah.
And like, what? And like, they were just like, we used it at some point ages ago. And it's like, but what?
A lot of telephones in Fortnite, okay? Like...
yeah, clearly. But yeah, it's nice. It's one of those things where like there can be a million different places where you can adjust to the same setting.
Yeah.
right? I'm like, oh, I want the volume of this thing to be quieter. Do I adjust it on the file itself, on the sound cue, on the, you know, the subclass that it is, on the, you know, in the bus, in the, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just knowing when to use the different ones of those.
Consistency is key for me anyway. I'm just always like, that's why I like presets, I like buses. I'm just like, everything's going to be categorized. I'm very...
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I'm very like that. Because things can, even when you're working on a small game, you might think it's small, and then it gets really huge, and then you're like, oh, why didn't I have any presets?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, absolutely, right. Yeah, and then there's the process of like, oh, I'm gonna make a new class, new sound class. I now need to go back and recategorize all the things. Like I'll grab like a more specific thing, right? Like I think that's what happened with footsteps. I was like, no, I want to manually adjust all the footsteps aside from sound effects, and then just like manually retelling them like, hey, you belong to the footsteps class now. But yeah, and it's nice. It is nice being able to batch and just edit all those once.
Yep.
I'm like a really big fan of. I have what I count like gameplay critical sound effects.
Yeah.
Just pretty much anything that the player would need to respond to, and then having that as its own subclass. So that way players can be like, actually, I want the sound effects really down. Like fuck those birds and cars and whatever. Yeah. But the gameplay stuff that I'm gonna need to respond to is gonna be really high.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right, amazing. I gotta go, but this was so good, and thanks so much, and thanks for recording it.
Yeah, hopefully it's an okay recording, and then we can just put it up for, the game jam.
Yes.
All right, bye, Maize.
See you later, mate. Thanks so much. Bye.
I'll leave the Zoom call. Goodbye, everyone. I hope you've had a good time. If you have any more Unreal Audio questions, feel free to shoot me a message, and I'll try my best to answer anything I can. All right.